What's going on, guys? Here's my Redmax EB7000 backpack blower, and it's been a pretty reliable machine. Towards the end of last year, it started to run a little bit rough. I have a feeling that the carburetor is a little gummy, and honestly, I haven't touched this machine since I've owned it. So I went on Amazon and bought this little tune-up kit, and it costs about $30. I'll leave a link in the description below. They claim that I won't need to do any adjustments to the carburetor after I put it in, but we'll just see about that. So anyway, in today's video, I'm going to teach you how to do a tune-up on your Redmax EB7000. So we're going to replace carburetor, new spark plug, new fuel tank plug and filter, and we'll also put a new gasket on the carburetor. We'll check the air filter. I didn't get a new air filter. First thing I'm going to do is take off this pipe that goes in between the air box and the carburetor. Next thing I'm going to do is remove this throttle cable that goes to the top of the carburetor. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go over to the throttle handle and make sure that the throttle is all the way down. From there, it's helpful if you have a little screwdriver, but what you're going to need to do, you're going to need to rotate this forward, twist this cap a little bit, like so. See how that cable just kind of pops up, then take your screwdriver and simply lift that up. Now the throttle cable is completely separated from the carburetor. To finish removing your throttle cable, all you do is take the black sleeve of the throttle cable and just pull it out. It'll come right out. Next thing we need to do is remove the fuel supply and return lines off the bottom of the carburetor. And these should simply slide off like so, which we will be replacing these, so if these fall apart, don't worry, so long as you got the same kit that I did. This one wants to fight me a little bit. Oh yeah, see, that just kind of tore apart, so good time to replace these fuel lines anyway. Next thing we need to do is disconnect this bell from the carburetor itself. So just take a Phillips head on an impact or screwdriver, and there's two Phillips head screws. Those are actually connected all the way through the carburetor. So I'm going to remove this part from the carburetor. Put on my clean sheet. Just going to take a quick look at the carburetor. Looks pretty clean, I mean, but there's so many small jets and ports in here. It's just, you know, for how cheap these are, it's really not worth going into these. Just easier to replace them. Now, before we go ahead and finish replacing the carburetor, now is the ideal time to replace the fuel tank seal. So this just comes right out. Good time to inspect your old fuel filter. It's just not too bad. Doesn't hurt to replace it though, so I'm going to put this in the appropriate receptacle. And in order to put the new one in, it just pops right in there. But something to note upon, there's no way to tell which one of these lines after you put this in the tank has the fuel filter on it and, you know, which one is the return line. So I decided to take a green zip tie and just mark the fuel line with the filter on it, which that's going to be the inlet line. So now we can go ahead and put that down in the tank. And just work this cork in the hole. There we are. Simple. Alright, so now we can start getting the carburetor ready to be installed. So something really important to note upon, I mean, you can reuse the old gasket, but my kit came with the new gasket, so clearly I'm going to use the new gasket. When you put this gasket on the carburetor, just make sure you install it in the right orientation. See how there's a little hole on the carburetor? You just want to make sure that your gasket matches that as opposed to up like that, otherwise you're going to have problems. So just match what was there before. Here's a look at what the old gasket looked like. For this it didn't matter because it was the same either way, but this one needs to be face down. So that's going to go directly on the block. Now the back side, there's a little O-ring right here. This is completely optional. This is something I use on my hot tub for all the O-rings that connect to the motors. This is a multi-purpose lubricant with a PTFE, which is like pipe thread sealant. So, you know, completely up to you if you want to use a little bit of this stuff. Just if you do use this, try to make sure that you don't get it in the into the hole in your carburetor. Try to just keep that stuff only on the O-ring. So from there, we can take our bell, Simply slide this down like so. And that fuel bulb should be on the bottom. With my kit, they also included replacement fuel bulbs, which if this ever cracks, all you do is take off these 4 Phillips head screws on the bottom and that's easy to be replaced. So I'm going to put my gasket on here now, like so. And now we can install this on the block. Alright, so I'm going to install the new carburetor now. And what you're going to want to do is just line up these screws in their receiving holes. And you want to start these screws off with a screwdriver just to make sure they catch. Preferably I'd like to do this by hand, but I can't fit my hand in there to spin these. You definitely don't want to start off with an impact in case they misthread and you're going to cause some damage. So just good habit to get into. Start things off by hand before you switch to the impact. Both these feel good. So I'm going to take the impact, a little bit of gentle pressure. Not going to go too far. Just going to finish them off by hand. It's nice and tight. Happy with that. So now I'm going to reinstall the throttle cable, and all you do is you're going to want to take this cable and try and fish it back through this adjustment piece here. So simply fish it through like so. That looks good. I'm going to try and find my handy dandy flathead screwdriver. And we're just going to reinstall this the same way we took it off. So we're going to have to take our thumb or something, put some pressure on this throttle here, twist it, try and get that cable to drop right in. It should countersink like so. And that is reconnected. Something important to check at this step, just go ahead and pull your throttle up and down and make sure that there's no obstruction between this throttle wheel and your bell right here. A moment ago, my throttle wheel was actually making contact with the bell and it was holding it up right about there. So I actually took a flathead screwdriver and very carefully shifted this bell back to the left a little bit. But if you ever have a sticking throttle, I'd check that. This is plastic, so you can file this down a little bit or just try and shift your bell over a little bit. All I did, shifted my bell over, and I have no clearance issues at this point in time. Just something to check on if you're using aftermarket parts like I am. Okay, so now we're ready to reconnect our new fuel lines to our new carburetor. Now, it's important that you connect these in the right orientation. Your blower will still work if you connect these up inversely. However, the issue with connecting them in the opposite orientation is that there's not going to be a fuel filter on your inlet line. So anything that'll fit in the tube that is sitting down in your tank, well, that's going to get sucked up in your carburetor and clog up your carburetor. So you're going to have to replace your carburetor probably pretty quickly. So earlier on in the video, I said that we should mark our fuel supply line, the line with the fuel filter, with a zip tie. So I know which one has my fuel filter. Now, which barb do I hook it up to? You're going to want to hook it up to the barb, or well, the nipple that has 2 barbs on it. It's closer to the fuel bulb, and it's also a bigger port, a bigger inlet. So I know this one goes right here. Again, this is the line with the fuel filter. This is our inlet line, the one we marked. It's going to go onto the 2 barb, larger ported nipple. I'll take 2 hands to put this on here, huh? And that is on there good and tight. And then we can take the return line, and the return line goes onto the outer nipple. It's on the out, well, it's kind of like on the outside of the carburetor, and you can also tell that this is the return line because it makes a nice elbow, and there's only 1 barb on this. So go ahead and slip that on, and we are connected and good to go. If you did mark your line with a zip tie, it's a good idea to cut that zip tie off very carefully. In case you put that on too tight, it may restrict your fuel in the future. Now I'm going to reconnect the pipe that goes in between the air filter box and the carburetor. Turns out I don't have a spark plug wrench that will fit this plug appropriately, so I'm just using a 19mm socket. That is quite a bit crusty. I think this was long overdue. This is where I don't like to use impacts. I like to do everything by hand here. Check the cap. Contact looks okay. Put this back down top of the spark plug. Make sure you push it in firmly. One of the last things to do is to check the air filter on the top of the machine. So simply take these two spin-off bolts, remove the cap. So you have a primary and a secondary air filter, which it's not terrible. Try and be careful not to drop anything in the bottom of the tray here. This air filter's not in terrible shape. Really should be replaced, but what I'm going to do, take it over to my air wand. I'm going to blow out both these filters and then I'll reinstall them back on the machine. Only thing left to do now is to take it outside, see how she runs. Blower's running really smooth right now, it fired right up. So at first the idle was a little bit too high. All you do if your idle's too high, take a Phillips head screwdriver, like a #1 Phillips head, and back this idle adjustment screw to the left. If you want the idle higher, twist this to the right. You'll hear the idle pick up. So just adjust it to where you feel is right. That's about right for me.